Hey everyone, this is Volk from The Sound of Convergence, and today we're talking about the Taiga from Pittsburgh Modular. Let's do a rundown of its features, see what sounds we can get out of it, which modules best to complement it, and talk about the pros, cons, and alternatives. Here's a quick preview of what's to come. In this video, we're looking at the Taiga by Pittsburgh Modular. The Taiga is a fully featured semi-modular synthesizer and contains a MIDI control section, 3 oscillators, a preamp, a 5-channel mixer, an LFO, a variable state filter, 2 ADSR envelopes, a dynamic section, and a delay. You can connect those different sections in many different ways via the CV out and inputs at the bottom. But like all semi-modular synthesizers, the Taiga has an internal normalized routing so you can play it right away, just by sending some MIDI notes to the MIDI input. Let's have a quick look at the different subunits of the Taiga before showing some sound examples. The Taiga contains 3 identical oscillators based on a cascading wave-shaping circuitry developed by Pittsburgh Modular. Possible wave shapes are sine, warped sine, triangle, warped triangle, saw, warped saw, square, sine and square, and a function that randomly selects the waveform whenever a gate input is received. Each can be folded via the shape button with up to 6 folds. The pitch of each oscillator is controllable via MIDI or CV, indicated by this icon here. You can also sync each waveform to about any signal. The CV in for the sync includes an amplifier, making it possible to also sync it to sine waves and other waveforms not normally used for syncing. The output of the 3 oscillators and the noise source, as well as the input of the preamp, are mixed in the mixer section. The preamp can amplify any signal up to 30 times, which makes it usable to bring up line levels to Eurorack levels. The mixer acts as a 5-channel mixer by default, but you also have the option to take out the signal from channel 1 and 2 separately to channel 3 to 5. The mixer accepts CV and audio, so you can also mix your CV signals, but there's no CV control over the mix. The summed output of the mixer is routed into the filter. The analog 2-pole 12 dB state variable filter is, just like the oscillators, a custom design by Pittsburgh Modular and is advertised as offering a warm organic sweep through the full frequency range. You will see in the sound examples later that the filter is very polite and silky, akin to some Japanese filter designs. The filter offers a low pass, band pass, and high pass function, of which any 2 types can be combined. For example, you could combine a low and a high pass to create a notch filter. And just like for the oscillator waveform, there's a random function that randomizes the filter type on each clock hit. The filter is then directly connected to the dynamics module. The dynamics section has 3 different modes. It can act as a plain VCA, as a low-pass gate controlled by the ADSR, or a plugged low-pass gate with adjustable response time. The 2 ADSR envelopes are normalized to control the dynamics section and the filter respectively. And you can dial in the amount using the FREG CV2 and the DIN CV attenuverters. At the end of the signal chain, we have a bucket brigade delay, which can have delay times of 16 to 250 milliseconds. The brain of the module is right here, the MIDI center. You can convert MIDI to CV here, or use MIDI inputs to play the Taiga directly. It contains an arpeggiator, a randomized sequence generator, glide controls, and a clock source. There's also much more. The Taiga also features an LFO, a sample and hold, a CV mult, but let's talk about those when they come up in the following patches. Alright, so all you need to do to play the Taiga out of the box is to send some MIDI notes to its MIDI input. I am using an Arturia keystep and this MIDI to TRS cable here to get going. And with that, we're ready to go. The next section is all about how the Taiga sounds out of the box with no talking. So once you start adding cables, you can get all kinds of sounds out of the Taiga. Let's start with some percussive sounds. In this example here, I'm using the Arturia key step to trigger two envelopes on the Taiga. One envelope is changing the pitch of my oscillator 1 sine wave, and the other envelope is controlling the dynamic section, shaping the volume of my kick drum. So the first envelope is going into the mixer first before going into the pitch of oscillator 1, so I can attenuate the signal and decide how much I want it to affect the pitch decay of my kick drum. And we can fine-tune the kick drum by changing parameters in envelope 1 or the mixer. You can also emulate hi-hats by using the FM inputs on the Taiga. I'm using oscillator 2 into the FM input of oscillator 1, and I'm using oscillator 3 into the FM input of oscillator 2, and I'm actually using the oscillator 1 into the FM input of oscillator 3. So they're all modulating each other, and what normally happens in those cases is that it gets really chaotic and noisy. So this is a patch that was briefly described in the manual of the Taiga. What I'm doing here is I'm taking the main output and I'm molding the signal once to go out to my sound card and the other part going back into the preamp. And so what happens is that when I turn up the preamp, I get a lot of instantaneous feedback that will griddy up my sound source. So this is how it sounds without the feedback engaged. And this is how it sounds once we turn up the feedback. But of course, you can also use the Taiga as a complex oscillator. I'm using the output of oscillator 2 to FM modulate my oscillator 1. There's a few small other things that I'm doing. I'm using the sine output of my oscillator 2 to control the shape of oscillator 1. And oscillator 2 is also hard synced to oscillator 1 using this cable here. You get quite aggressive complex timbres out of this, just something like this here. So this patch here is exploring most of the randomized features we have on the Taiga. The Taiga can create a 32-step random sequence, and we're using the Taiga's random clock as well to trigger the sequence in this kind of unsteady clock pattern. On top of that, we have oscillator 1 selecting a different waveform whenever the gate triggers, and so we get this really random selections of sounds and melodies. We're also using the sample and hold, which gives us random values on every clock trigger to change the resonant frequencies of our notch filter. The Taiga also has a paraphonic mode that you can access by pressing the Edit and ARP button at the same time. Press the ARP button until only the bottom light of the oscillators is lit up. Once you've set it up, the velocity output on the MIDI control module acts as an offset that you can use to play the Taiga paraphonically. You can also use the Taiga as an FM synthesizer. For that you will need an external VCA and some envelopes. So I have the Taiga set up so that oscillator 2 is frequency modulating oscillator 1, but not directly. I'm sending oscillator 2 into a VCA first, use an envelope to change how much oscillator 2 is affecting oscillator 1 at a given time. I've set it up so that oscillator 2 is modulating oscillator 1 much more at the beginning of a note and much less as the note is sustained. So here's the sound without modulation. I also like to use the Taiga with an external filter to add more character and grit to the sound, especially 24 dB ladder filters. So here's just a quick example of how the Taiga sounds with the internal filter versus a ladder filter. So what do I think of the Taiga overall? I think the Taiga really excels at providing a ton of functions for a reasonable price. Like any semi-modular, some compromises between functionality and price had to be made, but getting a free oscillator subtractive synth for around about 750 euros with wave shapers, a low-pass gate and more is a strong value proposition. Some cons I'm more than happy with, given the need for compromises, are that the LFO does not have CV control, because you could always use one of the oscillators as an LFO anyway. I also understand that there's no CV control over the mixer or envelopes, and that's fine. My main grievance with the module, however, is the lack of fine control over the envelope's decay and release times, especially at very short time settings. It's quite hard to dial in short decay times precisely, because even small adjustments to the attack time knob will lead to noticeable jumps of the attack time. You will also have to ask yourself if the onboard filter is your cup of tea, but I hope the sound example provided in this video will give you a good idea of what to expect. When it comes to expanding further, I would recommend getting an envelope generator like the Clavis Quadigy or Make Noise Maths, etc. These will help with getting more control over your envelopes and can also act as more customizable LFOs. If you want to do FM type sounds, a 2-channel VCA is needed, and if you want a different filter character, have a look at ladder filters such as the 100 Grit or Happy Nerding's MMM VCF. The Taiga does not have a sequencer, so I like to pair it with a key step, but I also feel that a Moog Mother or a DFAM are great companions, as they not only provide a sequencer, but also a different flavored filter. If you're looking for alternatives to the Taiga, Make Noise Zero Coast is a great West Side approach to synthesis if you prefer that to the subtractive synthesis style of the Taiga. Have a look at this trigger if you're more interested in feedback-type architectures. Pittsburgh Modular also offers 2 more semi-modular synthesizers called the West Pest and the East Beast. If a sequencer is a must-have, then the aforementioned Moog synths could be for you. So that's all I have for you today. Subscribe for more Eurorack videos and reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.